Hello, welcome back. It's Sandi here. Today's card is created with the Stampers Anonymous Flower Garden Set, and we're using the masking technique today. For that, I'd like to use Inkadinkado stamping mask paper. You simply stamp on the white side, fussy cut it out, and peel off the back. It's sticky all over. I'm working on a piece of 4.5 by 6.5 Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I'm stamping the flower in Memento Tuxedo Black because I'm going to use my Copics to color the flower. When the ink is dry, I'm going to cover the flower with the mask that I just created so I can stamp the stem. You want to save the backing for your masking because you can use these masks numerous times, so it will save you having to cut them out every single time you want to use this stamp set. You can click the link underneath my video today to get a list of all the items that I have used in today's project. You can tell that I'm going to do a green flower today, and I'm starting with my lightest Copic, and I'm working around filling the whole petal in, flooding it. Then I'm taking the second darkest, and I'm starting to add highlights from the center of the flower out. And then I'm blending a little bit back with the beginning color, the lightest, and moving on to the next couple of petals. I like to use the technique of layering over top of wet ink because it allows the darker colors to fall right back down into the lighter base color, and it saves me having to blend it all the time. This is one of numerous ways you can add layers of color to your Copic coloring. And I've got this obviously on fast, so you can see me color quite a few of these petals. And you'll also see me go back and add color to previous ones as they start to dry a little bit. And sorry for the fuzzy, I'm using a Canon camera with a zoom lens, and it's very particular about what it wants to focus on. And it keeps moving from the pen to my flower. So I have most of the petals done now, and you'll see that I'm just going back and adding a little bit of shadowing. Just some of them have blended in a little bit too much, so I like to go back and touch them up a little bit. You could probably fuss around with one of these flowers for hours. I'll try and not to. And I'm going to start with the little petals that are flipped over, and you'll notice that I go to the second from the darkest color to start filling these in, and I'm going to leave a white space on a couple of the petals and come back and add a highlight. So this is the third darkest color, and I'm filling in all those little petals that have a flip over, and then I'm going to take the 67, which is the darkest of the greens that I'm using. I'm adding my shadows. And then you're going to see me come back over with the second lightest one and blend these in. So that's another fast and easy way of adding a highlight. Next, we're using 2 yellows for the center and to add a little bit of highlight to the flowers. Again, I'm starting with the lightest color and I'm coming back in and I'm adding the darker, and then I'm taking the lighter one and adding a little bit of sunshine to a couple of petals just where I think, the sun might hit it if it was shining down on it. I'm using my black Copic to do the leaves and the stem, and I decided I wanted black. It's kind of my pop of wow on this card, and you'll see why as we get into the background. But when we get to the second step, make sure that you've got a Sharpie around just to do some touch-ups. After we do all the inking on the background, you do not want to use your Copic again. Now we're going to start sponging our background. You've noticed that I've put my art piece on top of a larger piece of white cardstock, just keeping my surface clean and giving me something to hold on to. I'm also using a tissue because my fingers are dirty and I don't want to spread that around. The color I'm using are Mermaid, Lagoon, Mowed Lawn, and Pine Needles, and you'll notice that I'm going across the card instead of up and down like we have in the previous videos. And so I do the 2 outside colors first. Then I'm going to put the color down the middle, and that's the darker color, the Pine Needles. What I'm working on right now is Mermaid, Lagoon. Here comes Pine Needles, and I'm going to fill in the center, And if you haven't perfected blending yet, this is a super card to do, because you do not have to be perfect at blending for this, because we're going to do some stenciling and some painting overlay, and it hides a multitude of sins, believe me. I'm using the Tim Holtz Honeycomb stencil for this next step, and the Distress Oxide is Black Soot. And I'm kind of going down the middle around the flower. I'm kind of shadowing over to the right with this. And you don't want it too dark. Okay, so just that's dark enough. And then I'm cleaning my stencil immediately before I move on to the next. And I'm also going to heat set all of this. I'm going to be using a pen on the next step, so I want to make sure that this ink is really, really dry. And it suddenly dawns on me that I don't know what happens to the glue on the back of the masking paper, so I'm going to take it off because I don't want that masking paper stuck to my flower after all that work. And then I'm continuing to dry it with my heat tool, and I'm trying to get it as super dry as possible. And this is a very important step. For the next step, I'm using a fine tip black Sharpie, and I've just placed the stencil over top again. I didn't tape it down, I'm just kind of holding on to it. And I'm adding kind of half of the lines of the honeycomb design. And this is just a little background noise that I decided I wanted to add for some added interest around the back of the flower. And then you can see I am pulling in. This stamp is really, really fine, and I have so much going on and there's so much color going on. I decided to define the lines a little bit more, and I'm using my Sharpie. And again, I'm sorry for the little bit of fuzzy. My camera is very sensitive, and I like that most of the time. Today, not so much. Anyway, ripping around and just adding a thicker line to the flower because I really want it to stand out from my background. And I'm still using my tissue paper to hold on to my art piece because after all this ink, I have very dirty fingers. There we go. And now I'm also going down, and I would suggest here flip over to a 0.3 Copic liner pen instead of maybe the Sharpie. This is a little thick, but it does highlight it quite nicely. Next, I'm using a circle stencil, and I'm sorry I grabbed one that's no longer available, but I did some research and I have a couple of suggestions for you on my PDF page that you can find on my blog. The link is underneath the video. I'm using the Gina pigment white ink and a dauber, and I'm adding some of the circles, and you want to be careful you don't get too many. And you're going to notice that when I take the stencil off, it's really white, but this ink blends in with the background because of course there's moisture in it, and it's activating the Distress Oxide underneath, and the ink sinks into the color below and lightens out. It also lightens as we heat set. Next, I'm going to grab the lid from my Novus Misty Cleaner, and I'm dipping it in the ink, and I'm using it to add more background noise, little circles, and I like them that they're kind of distressed circles. I'm mixing a little bit of acrylic paint with water, and I'm going to do some splattering for the last step, and I am covering up my flower again with my mask, moving my good card out of the way, and getting a little carried away with my splattering. Love this step. I'm going to remove my mask again and get out my heat tool and heat set all of this ink. And because this is pigment ink, it does take a little bit longer to dry, so be careful because it will smear. And this is where I'm going back in with my 03 Copic, and I am doing little lines and circles around the little stamens on the flower. And then I'm taking my little bit bigger Sharpie and I'm filling my leaves and my stem back in again. They got a little bit dark or covered in ink, and this is the step I said don't use your good Copic marker on this step because it will pick up the distressed inks, and you don't want to wreck your Copic. And of course I'm working on my Tim Holtz glass mat, so cleanup is super easy. All right, I'm using my gel pen And I'm whitening up all those little stamens on the flower. Make them just pop. And heat setting again. Want to make sure everything is really good and dry. And I'm taking my Copic and I'm going around the edge of my art piece, and this provides a nice black line so I don't have to mat it. I'm adding Gina foam squares to the back of my art piece, and I'm going to mount it onto a Nina Solar White 110 pound card base, and this is 7 by 10 scored and folded at 5. And there you go, the finished cards. Aren't they fun? And they're really quite easy to do. I hope you'll give it a try. And back to the stamp set, there are a couple of flowers in here that would make really nice cards like this. I think that these two that I'm pointing to right now are the next two favorites that I will probably give it a go. And for all the instructions and the supply list, there is a link underneath this video to my blog where you can download them. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please give me a thumbs up if you did, and subscribe. And until next time, toodles!